Hello and welcome to the Cabin Boy Knits Woolcast. I'm Christopher.
And I'm Jamie. This is our next episode in our Canadian interview series.
And we are interviewing Marceline Smith. Some of you may know her as heyBrownBerry.
Now, she is not only a fabulous knitter and crocheter, she has taught at festivals worldwide, and she's also got a gift of bringing a community together with her big smile and her even bigger heart.
And she was the inspiration for our YouTube channel as well. Her knitting channel was one of the first ones that I watched on YouTube. So she's got a fantastic story and she's just waiting to tell it. So sit back, grab your favorite drink, and she will tell you her story. We are so fortunate today to be with Marceline Smith, or some of you may know her as heyBrownBerry. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, my friends. Thanks so much for having me. I feel honored to be part of this series. And for anyone who's watching, if you haven't watched the backlog yet, make sure you do that.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, we're super excited. And for those out there who are not familiar with heyBrownBerry, who is Marceline Smith?
So I am a Canadian living in the US. I was actually born in Jamaica, so I consider myself Jamaican. I'm a Jamaican-born, Canada-raised resident of the Southeast in the US. I actually live in Florida, and I am a knitter, crocheter, content creator. I have a YouTube podcast, and occasionally I design knitwear patterns and teach classes.
That's great. How did you get into knitting?
My mom is a crocheter. So I began knitting because the knitting books and the crochet books were on the same shelf in the library. Mm-hmm. And for some of your viewers, the idea that I would have learned from books might seem a bit antiquated, but that's how you used to learn to do new things. I went to learn how to crochet, and I knew that if I got into trouble, I had my mom as a backup to help me. And I just noticed that all the fiber arts kind of learning tools were in one space at the time. And I was curious about knitting because immediately I noticed that most knit fabric is very different from crochet fabric. So it's just another curiosity. And that was back in 2005. So it's going back a while now. And I think knitting has been popular in different regions at different times, but at that time it was really taking off. There were more online bloggers talking about knitting, and there were forums where you could go and chat with other people and connect. So I feel like I entered the fiber arts world as totally a hobbyist, but at the time there was so much information coming out that it was able to become obsessed with it.
And so what made you start a YouTube channel? I think you've been on it since 2016.
Yeah, it's been, right, 5 years, just about. I was not a big YouTube watcher at the time. I didn't really have other topics of interest to go look for on YouTube. But I believe I must have been pointed there by somebody saying, so-and-so has a tutorial for this technique and follow this link. And there was this rabbit hole of learning. So now a visual method to learn techniques versus books was really interesting to me. And it's just like it is today. You watch one video and there's a list of recommended videos for you to check out. And I think I just happened on, I won't remember now which podcaster it was, but I happened on a podcaster in a very simple format. They just were talking about their projects. And I thought, well, that's fascinating. I'm totally interested in this as a viewer. And then I started traveling more for work. And randomly one day I said, well, what if I just recorded some video clips of what I brought with me in my travel bag? Because I was always bringing knitting. I was on a lot of airplanes and trains. I always had a project in my bag. And I thought it would be cool to record a few snippets of what I brought with me and just talk about it like that person did.
Yep.
And so my very first video is me at a desk in a hotel room with horrible lighting, no editing capability, talking about the project that I brought with me on my trip. That's what hooked me to podcasting. I love the fact that I put this thing out there into the ether, and then people start writing comments and asking questions and talking about their projects. That hooked me.
I remember the first time I happened upon your channel on YouTube, and what really drew me in was I couldn't figure out, there was a familiarity, a sense of familiarity with you. I couldn't put my finger on it. And it was also just, I guess, the cadence of the way you speak. It was just like, it was almost mellifluous. Like it was just, it was just very, very easy to listen to, and it was relaxing. And so then I started to do some research and found out the Canadian connection, and I thought that has to be it.
I'm okay with believing that that's what drew us together, whatever it was. Fine. Yeah, and I thank you for the compliments. It's actually something that people comment on quite a bit. Even though I do a video podcast, they often comment on the fact that I'm easy to listen to.
Yeah.
And I'm gratified by that. It's not something that I work towards. I don't want to say that it just comes easy for me. I just mean that I think that's the way I speak when I'm talking about making. I think that's just how it happens.
Well, I think that's it exactly, because I was just, as you're saying this, I'm thinking to myself, well, this is you, and you hope that we want to be ourselves when presenting ourselves, right? And you are, because it's really fascinating, because the way you're just speaking to us now, when you're doing your YouTube videos, it's like you're talking to a friend, and do you know what I mean? You're talking the same exactly, you're actually talking to us, not quite face to face, but you're talking to your audience, but it's in the exact same manner. It's as if you're talking to a friend, which is a great natural thing that you have.
I also,
I feel that when watching your podcast too, and I appreciate it, because selfishly, now my YouTube channel has become a community corner. And so it's this cycle that feeds on itself, where if I make people feel welcome to come in, then they may feel open to converse. And I learn so much from that input. And, I am enabled by it to find new things to try. I feel supported by people saying, oh, you mentioned having trouble with this, or you were reflecting on that. And then they offer something that's super helpful. So I want to continue that feeling of like, come on in, let's have a chat. To what you do with your natural dyeing videos and the things that are kind of instructional, but still very accessible to say, you could do this too.
Yeah, one of the things, thank you. One of the things I enjoy about your instructional videos, or I think the reason why it makes it so successful, is the fact that it does, when you take somebody like Jamie, for example, who's stressed out about a new stitch or doing something, and so so you can tune in, and you're so calm, and the way you express things is very palatable and really helpful. So I think I'm not surprised to see the success in your instructional videos, or the fact that you're teaching all over the place now. Why don't you talk about that? Some of the festivals.
Absolutely. Well, depending on when folks watch this might be old news, but I'm very excited to be teaching at NITSE Virtual. And so the three of us will be attending a festival together, kind of.
Yes. Yeah, virtually, yes. Yeah, this will definitely be up before Knit City.
Okay, perfect. Right. So my next upcoming class, I'm teaching a sock class, and I would say that at this point, I could say socks are my specialty. I have taught in-person classes, and now this will be one of my first online classes. I've taught folks how to knit socks. My focus has so far been toe-up sock knitting, because toe-up sock knitting fits into my general making philosophy, which is make things that fit and make things that are useful. And I feel like with toe-up socks, if I can teach you how to make a sock that fits your foot, it's very likely that it will last longer and you'll like it more because it fits you better. And so that whole experience will be worth maybe a brand new technique for you if you're typically a cuff down sock knitter. So my upcoming class is going to be knitting toe-up socks to fit, and just talking about the different areas that you can manipulate. I actually have some examples if you guys want to see.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely.
So sometimes there's a bit of controversy between the toe-up sock knitters and the top-down knitters. I welcome all. All sock knitters are welcome.
Thank goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, I knit both. Just to be clear, I knit in both ends. But I think what happens with socks in particular, I've learned this as I've just done more design. I think that with socks, we tend to leave behind some of the approaches that we think are common for things like sweaters. Now, if you said to somebody, knit that sweater to fit you, they would think, of course I'm gonna knit the sweater to fit me. With socks, we don't tend to talk about fit as much and how you can modify things. And we don't tend to talk about things like swatching for socks because a lot of times they're done on tiny needles and it's meant to be a fast portable project. So some of our garment kind of approaches get left behind when you talk about socks.
Yeah.
So what I'm teaching in my class is just a few areas in a sock that you can modify to make sure that it fits you. And of course, because I love toe up, I'm starting from the toe. So here's some toes. These are toe samples. Most people are familiar with what we call like the wedge toe, right? Which is like a very symmetrical, almost triangular toe shape, which is great for beginner toe-up sock knitters because all you're doing is increasing on both sides of a line. And for most feet, that's okay. It doesn't give the best fit for everybody. So we all have come across most likely increasing stitches, adding more stitches in a round or a row. So I propose if this triangular pointier shape doesn't fit you, you could round it out a little bit and go from like a triangle to more of a curve,
Yeah.
Maybe your feet are a little bit wider and you need some more room in there. And so my theory is change where you put your increases to accommodate that.
Yep.
And then if you're a cuckoo crazy sock knitter like me, and you have weirdo feet like I do, maybe you want each of your socks to fit. I'll hold it closer so you can see.
Yeah.
Maybe you want each of your socks to fit left and right. So all your increases happen on one side only. And then you get sort of that anatomically a little bit more exact. So in that one area of a sock, you might find just changing up your approach may give you a better fit. And it goes on from there, different heel treatments, how you do measurements to make sure that the sock is snug and doesn't slip around in your shoes. I obsess over things like that and then teach people how to do it.
That's fantastic.
Well, it's interesting. It's because
Someone has to. Yes.
but what's interesting is, so the last one was just you're thinking, unusual shape to your foot, but that last one actually looks like, if you think when you buy a pair of insoles, they have that shape. They kind of go this way, and then they're the sole of your foot, the sole of a shoe. So now when you think about it, I'm not a designer and I've never knit a sock, but everybody's just like that first shape.
Yes. I think what happens is if you are a new sock knitter, for example, you may find a series of patterns that all have very similar instructions because there is kind of this basic sock approach. Every part of the sock has options, but most likely you'll come across a pretty standard approach to sock knitting. And you just might not think about the fact that, my foot is a little wider on this side. What if I put all the increases on this side? You just might not think about that until someone introduces you to that concept.
I think that's exactly because I'm fairly new and you're an instructor, it's interesting because I've not knitted a sock, but I've watched Christopher knit socks. And, we know that wool stretches. So you just slip it on, it's gonna fit. But it's the wear and tear on it, isn't it? Because it's going to start pulling on an edge or your heel or whatnot, and then your socks aren't going to last. So that's why I think when it comes to patterns and being a new knitter, we had this conversation prior in one of our knit-alongs where, you know, patterns are you know, meant for adjustments and interpretation, I think, but with yourself being a designer and knowing your socks, we need people like you who just go, hey, why don't we just do it like this? Because it makes sense. And so we need people who think and create the way you do.
Yes. I consider that to be empowered making. So I am empowering you to maybe just use my pattern as a recipe or a template or a starting point. I'm okay even if people take one of my sock patterns and the only thing they use is the textured stitches that I have included. I love when people take my toe-up sock patterns and knit them cuff down. I think it's a level of empowerment that gives what I hope, which is you can take this idea into any other project. Oh, I learned a new increase here. I bet I could use that next time in my sweater project or my shawl knit. And then also, I am a bit frugal, if I'm being honest. So I don't really like the idea of thousands of stitches not being worn and used. I feel like the love I have for the yarn and the peacefulness that comes with the knitting, that's all great. But if then I tuck it away and I can't use it, or I maybe even feel that I would want to give it to someone because it's not quite right, for me, that feels a bit wasteful. And so I'm always working, how can I avoid that? And really it's like a self-love thing as well. I love myself enough to knit socks that fit.
That's a great one. I think I'm converted now to toe down.
I haven't knit a sock
Toe
yet,
up.
but I think it's toe up all the way.
Toe up, I mean.
Toe up.
Just-
Toe up. Yeah. Yeah.
Down sweaters because of that opportunity to try it on too. And
Yeah.
and you may have experience with this. You knit a top-down sweater, there's a lot of different points at which you can decide how wide, how long, do I like this fabric, try it on, how does it actually look on me? I'm simply suggesting you can do that with your socks too.
Yep, makes sense.
I'm glad you brought that up again, and I'm only going to comment because I was knitting my first sweater, and this was the discussion we're having about modifying patterns. Now, Christopher has wider shoulders than me, so I started off, the top started with the same number of stitches, but when I got to here, I said, and he was already ahead of me, and I tried his on, I'm like, this is not going to fit. But because the beginning was the same, I just midway, like you say, adjusted. So it's interesting that that would be the reason to knit from up here down for the sweater. And the same thing applies with you at the socks. It's going from the toe up for that same reason, which makes sense to me now. See how much I'm learning already?
I love it. I love it. And now if you do decide to knit socks, you know where to come.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I want to stay on the theme of socks for a little bit longer and talk about walk good socks.
Okay, perfect.
So-
That's my pattern, the walk good sock pattern. Do you want me to just talk a little bit about how that came to be?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Good. Okay, so walk good is a patois phrase. I'm from the island of Jamaica, and patois is the English. It's a dialect. It's we call it broken English in a way because most of the words are based on English words, but there is some Spanish and Dutch influence as well. So walk good translated means take care as you go. You're leaving someone and you know they're headed out on a journey, you tell them to walk good, and that's just your well wish for their next leg of the journey. And I designed the walk good socks for the other piece of my knit philosophy, which is knit things to wear and make them so that wearing them is kind of front of mind when you're making them. So the walk good socks are, again, a toe up pattern. And I have an example here. The idea behind this, and I'm going to show you, this is a sneak preview just for you two, because I love you so much. Another sock pattern that's coming out that's based on the walk good construction.
Oh,
so these are knit.
Nice. Those are beautiful.
The highlight feature of the Walk Good sock pattern is that the heel pad
Yep,
is here at the bottom. You might be able to see a little texture
definitely. Yes.
at the bottom of the foot.
Yeah, it looks cushy.
Exactly. So that's just a simple slip one, knit one stitch pattern, which many people are familiar with on this
Yep.
portion of the sock.
Oh.
So I'm going to hide my face. So normally we see what's called a heel flap and gusset. So a heel flap and gusset construction is pretty common, where those slip stitches happen on the back of the heel. Well, all of my wear and tear happens under my toes,
Yes.
under my heel.
Yeah.
So I made the Walk Good sock pattern so that you knit it toe up, and you can reinforce those areas with that knit, slip one, knit one pattern. You just do it in a different place, and that place is now reinforced so that your socks will last longer.
Perfect. Wow.
So you can.
And that's another good point, because Christopher's socks, they've been wearing
And
at
Terry.
they've
The
been
exact same spots.
wearing on the ball of the foot. So
Yeah.
that's where,
Okay, so when are they going to be available, and where can we get them?
Out later this year.
Okay.
I already have the pattern underway. We just we want to have it test knit, because
Yeah.
I'm introducing one more element here. So the Good socks had this reinforced portion on the bottom, and I'm introducing the idea of using color work, just
Yeah.
2-stitch color work.
Yeah, that's great.
Right, so when you use multiple yarns, if you've ever knit color work, when you are moving from one color to the next, your floats can actually act as additional reinforcement.
Yeah.
So if you have color work sweaters, notice that that area of the sweater is a little bit heavier, the fabric is more dense, and we can use that to our advantage in that same part of the sole of the sock,
Yes.
because all of the floats make it nice and squishy, but it also gives some strength. So I'm just saying, what if you added some color while adding some reinforcement? And
Yeah.
what if you had your slip stitches act as, some padding? And then what you have is the name of this pattern will be Socks for Wearing, because I'm trying to put that idea out.
That's fantastic.
okay. Well, it's funny because at the beginning you said, at the beginning of the sock conversation, you had mentioned, that you've been doing a lot of socks, and you feel, genuinely now you are the sock expert now. You know your socks. There you
Things that I want to explore and learn, but it feels like a small enough canvas that
Sure.
I can try so many things, and the project still goes by pretty quickly. So that's compelling.
So how much time do you have to knit? Because you spin, and I've watched some of your natural dyed episodes, and you work, and you
and you
have
have a
family, and so how much?
My secret is skip the sleeping.
Yes.
So you're right. It is. I have a full plate because I filled it up. I feel like I'm fortunate that my full-time work is done from home. So I have a home office, and I actually, before the pandemic, I did a lot of travel. So I did have a lot of stitching time while I was traveling. My meetings and things like that still allowed me enough downtime or airplane time, commute time, that I could do the knitting part. As far as the other things, post-pandemic, my work had a lot less travel, like many people. And I'm fortunate that much of what I do for what I call my paycheck gig is computer work. So phone calls and being on web meetings. And I have now a structure that gives me pretty much the same stop time every day. So I know how many hours I have in an evening, for example, that I can do things for my heyBrownBerry community.
Sure.
And my weekends are also quite free. So I use time on the weekends for that. I have had to carve it out. For example, Saturday is a no scheduled activity. I need one day a week that is a predictable stretch of time with nothing on the calendar. But other than that, I'm fortunate that I have pockets that I can work things in on evenings and weekends. And I feel like the way I particularly am building my business, it's still very much, my Fibre business is still very much on my own time. I take on deadlines as I want to. And I know not everyone who's working with Fibre has that opportunity. I get paid every 2 weeks, no matter what, as long as I do my job. So ramping up or ramping down on Fibre things is still kind of in my control. So that's really why I'm able to do a lot of it. It's on my time.
Right. Yep, that's fantastic. I have a question for you. We've been deprived of festivals, and you mentioned that you were traveling quite a bit before COVID. So can you share some of your favorite, or will you share some of your favorite festivals with us, just so we can live vicariously through that? And also, I just want to I wanted to comment on your travel logs, which I love. They're fantastic. And that's really why I'm asking the question as well, because you do such a great job of that. And what are you thinking about when you put those together?
Well, thank you. And I'm glad you've enjoyed them. I certainly enjoyed making travel logs, travel vlogs. I call them virtual visits. I feel like that's just another connection point with the community, because let's be honest, we can't all go to all the festivals, even if we wanted to. And early on in my podcasting, when I was traveling for work, if I had any extra time, I would find the local yarn store, and I would go into the yarn store and ask politely, would it be okay if I film and feature your shop? Because I have this growing community of people who are interested in seeing places that are unfamiliar to them. Most, 90+% shop owners were very much into the idea, and some of them even let me interview them, which is just, I love that. And I love the idea of then bringing, my followers and community members into a space. So when I started going to festivals, the additional element was me really leaving home. So I've been to a few festivals I love. To answer your question, I really love the Edinburgh Yarn Festival. I really hope that one comes back over in Edinburgh, Scotland. The Woolen Festival in Ireland. Now these are all across an ocean from us. They're very, very good. And I had the opportunity just before 2020, I had the opportunity to go to my first Rhinebeck, which is the New York Sheep and Wool Festival. Highly recommend that one as well. Now those, and I've also been to Vogue Knitting Live in New York, which I know you guys have visited.
Yep.
And saw each other at Rhinebeck at the Friday night event. So you both know the large scale of those events and how intense some of that can be. So I have to mention another one of my favorites, which is Squam. And Squam is, I have a vlog after my first couple visits to Squam. Squam is a Fibre retreat that takes place here in the US in Holderness, New Hampshire. Squam is on a much smaller scale, and it's really what I think of when I hear the word retreat. It's really a relaxed, kind of outdoor centric, cabin in the woods, which I know you'll appreciate, kind of experience with classes and lots of social time. And it's multifaceted because it's not just knitting, it's not just crochet. There have been classes for painting and writing and other creative expressions. So if you're not really into the huge crowds or big city, or if you live in North America and you maybe can't or don't want to travel hours across the ocean, we have some really good festivals here as well. So all the ones I mentioned are festivals I would absolutely go back to, and that I have filmed and featured on my podcast in some episode.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that Rhinebeck was my first Rhinebeck, and Vogue Knitting New York was also my first time, and both of those just pre-COVID. So yeah, look forward to getting back to those.
Yeah, it's one of those things that reminds us that there really is something to this thing that we love. I think any version of getting out there and being in community with others in person is valuable. And what I have learned now with everything going virtual is that you can still create some of that. We're doing that right now. Yeah. You can still have some of that virtually, and you can still encourage people by being accessible. You and I have been on the Indie Untangled event where people are literally attending from all over the world. And they have made comments like, I would not have been able to attend this festival if it wasn't done online. So definitely there's value in that. Mostly I miss the in-person because the festivals I tend to love are the ones where you go out during the day, you do all the peopling, and then you go to some cozy little place with 3 or 4 other people, and you have food and coffee, and you can kind of be a little bit more insular at the end of a big social day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any moments that stand out maybe more than others in your experiences? Something unusual, something just really hitting home, heartfelt that comes to mind?
The first thing that comes to mind from both festivals where there was kind of somewhat of an agricultural element was that I really enjoy the reminder of the shepherds and the sheep. I live in South Florida. It's warm here most of the year. I have woolly hair and a woolly heart. It doesn't matter to me that I'm a tropical born baby living in a tropical place. I love wool enough to work with it year round. So there were a couple of instances at festivals where I got to meet a shepherd that could tell me about the sheep that made the yarn that I'm looking at. And it's just a unique experience to touch that part of the process. So that was the first thing that came to mind when you asked me that.
Yeah, I appreciate that as well. That's one of the things I love about Rhinebeck and some of the places where you can actually talk to the producers of yarn. What is it like knitting in Florida? I see some of your episodes when you're sitting in the backyard, and especially I'm so envious when especially during the winter time. But what is it like knitting? And are there a lot of yarn shops, or how does that all work?
Well, first I want to say that you both are invited to come sit by the fire pit anytime.
Oh, that's fantastic.
If you'd like to come eat with me by the fire pit when it's cooler, because I think our version of cooler might be just perfect for you.
Yeah, I think so. I'm trying to imagine, I'm trying to get past, wait a minute, why would you have a fire pit in Florida? Right? Because we have a fire pit out here in the winter, it's because it's -20. That's cold. Your eyelashes freeze and your eyes, you tear up and your eyelashes and your eyes freeze shut. For real.
Yes,
Not a fire pit in Florida.
there's a few days here where it's just blissful to be by the fire, because for us it's relative. When we have a 20-degree temperature drop here, I mean, I'm Canadian, but my blood has thinned. We feel I put on all the wool as soon as possible, even if I know it's not going to last very long. So yeah, it's all relative. I think that the places I've been where I've been by a fire and it's really cold outside, you're absolutely right. That's a totally different feeling. Yeah, so knitting in Florida, I live in South Florida, and I live probably an hour or so from any major city I could get to on a highway within an hour or an hour and a half. So I live near West Palm Beach, which is more East Coast, and I could be in Miami, for example, in about 90 minutes, and I could be in Fort Lauderdale on the beach in less than an hour. And those two cities I just mentioned are pretty developed and very high population, and there are yarn stores there. Near me in Palm Beach, the odd thing is we have a lot of what we call snowbirds, people who come down from the east, even from Quebec, and New York and New Jersey and places that are very cold in the winter. They often either vacation here or live here for part of the year. So where I am in Palm Beach, there's actually a high population of people who have retirement homes here. And it's strange, but there's a really big knitting community amongst that group. Like if you did a diagram of snowbirds and knitters, you know, they kind of cross over, but we don't have a lot of yarn stores in my particular area. So the other major cities have those. So I think knitting here is it's a virtual experience. I do a lot of my yarn shopping online. I do a lot of my interacting online. I have been part of knitting groups, but they're just not as common here. I think I make a big deal of knitting season every year, but you know, it's not cold enough for people to feel like they need to start making woolly wear. So we just don't have that same element. For me, I've just always been interested in turning string into material. So it's not necessarily that I'm making stuff because I need it for home living. However, traveling for my job and traveling for knitting festivals happens often enough, too cold places, that I can totally justify my woolly wardrobe.
Excellent.
I think what happens for most, maybe this is a bit general, but what happens for most Southern knitters is you start to explore other fibers like cotton and linen and hemp and those lighter weight fabrics, or things like silk, where the temperature, you know, it kind of goes with the temperature that it's needed for. And I completely appreciate that. I don't do that as much myself just because I'm wool obsessed, but I think from what I've heard, most Southern knitters, they just change their materials a little bit so they can still stay well within within the community.
Great. I was watching one of your episodes, and it was called California Dreaming. And I thought that was perfect. It was, what a great lesson for your daughters. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So this is, you have to remind me, because I think I may have, did I have them on?
You did, yes, yes. One was sitting on either side of you on the couch.
Yeah, so as a family, we love travel. And one of my husband's bucket list items was to go to visit the sequoias and the redwoods, which are just a set of gigantic trees on the west coast of the US. And my daughters have grown up always on road trips, and they've been, you know, to different continents. They've been the children of parents who love to travel, basically. And there are two places that they are both obsessed with: California and every part of Canada we've ever visited. Both coasts of Canada and California are places that we've talked back and forth. Oh, maybe we could live there. Wouldn't that be nice? Because it combines what we love, which is gorgeous landscape, change in landscape. Florida is very flat. Beach are great, sun is great. There's not much in change of landscape. So in California, huge trees, hills. Within a few hours drive, you have snow, and then a few hours more drive, you have gorgeous coastal, you know, almost tropical weather. And so we are always kind of daydreaming about where we would live next or where we would travel next. And my girls are just in that mindset because it's how they grew up. And I probably am overdue to have them on the podcast again, because I love their perspective on things. They're pretty good on camera.
They're excellent on camera. And one of the things I loved about that episode was the lesson that they learned. Basically, you know, if you want something, here's how you go about achieving it through little steps. And are they both knitters? Do they both continue to knit today?
They know how to knit, yes. And thank you for that reminder. So they both know how to knit. They both know how to crochet. They were homeschooled. My children were homeschooled, and Fibre crafts was a learning activity as much as a leisure activity for us. And they really appreciate, I think, because of the way they've grown up, they really appreciate kind of how things come to be. They have this idea that, like you said, if they want something, there's a way to go about it. The California trip that we took with them, the first California trip that we took with them, was to go to this, was a festival, convention called VidCon. Yeah. And VidCon, for those who don't know, was a convention for YouTubers and other online content creators like us, except it was a much younger crowd, to be honest. And they really wanted to go to this event. And I said, okay, to show you that to go from point A to point B, there's effort involved, there's cost, you know, there's planning. I gave them the task to raise money for their trip. I said, I will get us there. And we went and looked at prices, flights, and all of these things. But you need to raise some money toward the cost, and you need to plan out parts of the trip. And some people might have said, well, they're kind of young to be raising money, but they each raised over $800 in the time period that I gave them towards this trip. And they had mapped out the donut places we were going to visit.
Sounds like it.
You know, what was around our hotel for eating options. And I think they really learned, okay, you can say, oh, I want this or I want that. Then you have to kind of go back from that dream and figure out how do you get there.
Sure.
And I was super proud of them because they managed it. Bake sales and making hand knit items to sell, all kinds of things, pet sitting. They did all these little odd jobs to put their money together.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
That's absolutely incredible because, you know, I myself don't have children of my own, but it's incredible because you would assume that, you know, if people would think they're too young to be taught this sort of thing, but our children are just, that's all they do is just, they want to learn. And so starting at a young age to have that, you know, planning, organizing. So, I mean, it's what some people don't learn till they're in university, you know, industry and how to start from the bottom up, starting up a business. Well, you've already instilled that in these children. And you're saying you're new to the teaching videos. You've been teaching a long time. Your teaching skills go way back. There's where the natural teaching comes in.
Yeah, I guess you're right. It's funny that I don't connect those transferable skills every time, but yeah, you're right. We had a homeschool knit group and I taught many new adult and child knitters. So yeah, I guess you're right. Thank you for making that connection because it's funny how when you look back, it feels like some things just happened, you know, like, oh, I just happened to get this opportunity to teach a knitting class, but you're right. There's usually something that grew. There was a seed somewhere.
Yep, definitely. I was watching, I think it was on Instagram. It was a recent post, I think, and you were doing squats. And I thought, oh my gosh, not only did it make me feel guilty for not working out, but also I was so impressed at the weight that you were.
So I have a dear friend of mine once said to me, this stuck with me, you know, you have those friends that kind of speak into your life sometimes. And she said, you were not made for stillness. And I was like, that's true. I wasn't. I've been doing some form of weightlifting and sort of resistance-based exercise now for years. Like many of you, I certainly took time off from that during the pandemic and just settled into my full couch potato persona. I love strength training and I love working with barbells and kettlebells and other things. And honestly, squats, the reason you probably see that a lot on my Instagram is because it's one of the simplest full body type exercises that are out there. And I feel like maybe when you see someone doing them, especially if you haven't tried, even if they know it doesn't involve your whole body, but it really does. And when you add a weight like a barbell or something like that, if you're doing it properly, every muscle and your brain are engaged. So yeah, I get motivated sometimes to get out there in the garage and sling some weights around.
And so what do you listen to when I noticed you had earbuds in. So what do you listen to when you're working out?
Can I tell you, Christopher, Beyonce is on repeat in my life.
Excellent.
I like empowering music. I love percussion. That whole backbeat. I think that it does help keep my momentum and the intensity going. And there's probably 20 Beyonce songs that I could run in a loop. So most of the time it's that. Sometimes, oddly enough, I do prefer to listen to audio podcasts.
Yep.
And it's kind of weird. If I'm going for get my heart rate up and I just want to keep moving, I love music for that. But sometimes I'll listen to audio podcasts that are a little more monotone if I want to just focus on technique. So I might be moving a little bit more slowly on purpose, but thinking about technique to avoid injury. And I find that audio podcasts keep my brain engaged a little bit, but I'm not moving so quickly.
Right. Do you have any recommendations for people for podcasts?
So I'm just going to go ahead and admit now that I am a true crime junkie.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Here as well.
Yep, I listen to a lot. And what I'm obsessed with lately is the Dateline NBC audio podcast, because they're like 1 hour audio versions of the Dateline true crime kind of episodes.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm a bit of a sucker for a story that wraps up in 60 minutes.
Sure.
I do love a series, and I don't mind a true crime series where you kind of follow a case and that sort of thing over multiple episodes. But for working out or kind of unwinding, I like to know, you know, here are the important parties in the story. This is the climax point and what happened, and then they went to jail.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, so Dateline is my current favorite. There's so many good ones out there, to be honest with you. I get recommendations from people all the time. And say what you want about technology, I can go to Spotify or YouTube or Pandora, anywhere, and it's got recommendations there for me based on what I listen to. So
Yeah.
a lot of times I'm picking things at random.
now I was going to mention, just to change the topic, because I've seen you bake bread in a video. And so, and you know, having a family and children, how much, two questions.
And squatting and working with the kettlebell.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I keep putting that part off. I have a friend who's a very hardcore. She's a new yoga instructor. She's done so much, and she's always fit. She's always on me about yoga and getting back into shape, because that's something that I'm not doing enough of in the last while. But my question goes back to
Bread.
the bread. So bread and cooking for the family. And do you have any favorite recipes or traditional recipes that make you think of home? Maybe even back to your, you know, Jamaica or mom or family? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. Food is, I am a lover of food, 45 years strong. We've been like this, me and food. And I grew up in a family of cooks and home cooked. So it's always been part of my learning and things that I like to do. I call them kitchen adventures. Bread especially, because bread is kind of a chemistry to it to get it right. So it's one thing to put ingredients together, say in a pot on the stove, and do your seasonings and flavors, but you know, bread is chemistry and timing and ratios. So I love it for that aspect of learning and tweaking. And we all cook here. My daughters know how to cook. My husband is a very good cook. And I think for me, it's a craft, but there is a theme in a lot of these things. So this might sound weird, but a lot of what I am into has to do with the way things were. So how did people used to do things? You know, clothing used to be made from thread that was spun and then constructed, and food was made from, you know, ingredients probably that you grew and then put together. And even with exercise, it's like we used to use our bodies in ways that helped us survive. So a lot of the themes for me are ancestrally, or in ancient times, if you will. How did things happen? How did things come together? I'm always interested in that. Bread making, you know, cooking our traditional foods. You asked about that. I mean, in Jamaica, we love spice, we love seasoning, fresh combinations of ingredients. So things like curry chicken and rice and peas are some common favorites. My husband he only eats fish and vegetables. So we do a lot of like lentil-based dishes and fried fish and something, because that's also pretty common in Jamaica. You get fried fish and some kind of starchy food on the side. So yeah, a lot of that happens here, either from things we learned from our moms how to cook, because that's what they cooked in Jamaica, or because I'm interested in how a particular dish or a baked item is done. You know, what's the technique behind it?
It's interesting because you mentioned the way, you know, the food and the craft of it all, but then the baking, how there's the science and all the intricacies. Same with what you do when you knit and with your knit, because it all comes together as one, doesn't it?
It does. And that's the only way I can explain why these very different things all interest me. I think it's that element, that common element.
I want to mention something that I read, and only because I found it very worthwhile, and it's probably something that you inadvertently teach or directly involves what it is you have to say in your voice. And this was something I read where it says, we spark, we bloom, we grow. And within the community are real spaces where we assemble. And with your patterns, it mentions that they represent intersections and the crossing of paths that infuse and enrich our lives. So the texture of our individual experiences come together and form a community. And I know that is a big theme, and that's what Hey Brown Berry, that's what you're about. Tell us a little more.
I'm getting chills because it means everything to me that you found something in, what I call my pattern story, my design story, that you find something worthwhile in that. A lot of what I do with my knitwear design in particular begins with a theme like that. And I'm fortunate that there's always a topic worth discussing in our knitting community. Do you guys find that too? There's always something important to talk about.
Always.
Yeah, and so when I think about how can I represent something like our intersecting personalities and lived experiences in a texture, in a sock, there's something that allows me to put all of that caring about how a conversation might go into something as simple as a knitwear pattern, but something as lasting as a knitwear pattern. So yes, it definitely represents what I feel Hey Brownberry is about. It also lets me just keep tabs on what's happening. What are people talking about in our community? The topics of diversity and inclusion have come up a lot more lately. So people want to have conversations about where do we intersect? We can see where we're different or might feel separate, but where do we come together? So the timing of conversations like that can often inform what I want to knit next, or what I want to share next. So yeah, I feel really fortunate that even in the things that are a bit difficult or controversial or may cause conflict, there's still a path through that. Maybe folks who don't knit immediately see, how does that relate to yarn? But I think a lot of us see it. I think a lot of us realize that it's about so much more than that. Yeah, so I try to just let that happen somewhat organically. What do we care about? What do I care about right now? Or where would my voice be useful here? And it's not always a pattern. Sometimes it's an Instagram post or a podcast.
One of the questions I ask all of the interviewees is thinking about or mentioning your Fibre hero. So when you think about your past and people you've interacted with and had an influence on you or that you admire in the community, who would that be?
Oh my goodness.
So your Fibre hero.
I have 3.
Excellent. That's what most people say.
I have a dozen.
I mentioned this in an Instagram post recently. We are all so much more than one thing.
Yeah.
And so what I find admirable and heroic, I think stretches across multiple people in the community. So I'll name them quickly because this is who comes to mind right away. So one of my closest friends, Maria Muscarella, and she is known as Ninja Chickens online. And if you follow me or her, you will have seen pictures of the two of us just having a great old time in our fiber crafts. And I consider her a fiber hero because she is a natural born teacher. And so the element of her as instructor, as community maker through teaching is something that has had a powerful influence on me. And we've taught together. And so I've gotten to see her style of teaching. And she teaches things like eco-printing and natural dyeing and things that are it's like a new universe for some people, right? So the ability to communicate these concepts and put passion into it so that other people run off and want to indigo dye everything, to me is amazing. And she does it in a way that is so rooted in her love of the land and space. And that's given me a greener view of the world. And then the other would be Denise DeSantis, who's EarthtonesGirl.
Yes.
And I know you know her. Denise is a dear friend of mine. We've worked together on a few things. She is also sock obsessed. So for anybody who loves socks as much as I do, I highly recommend you check out EarthtonesGirl. Denise and I talk all the time about how do we empower people in the community. So she has a lot of tutorials and a lot of instructional videos. She's got patterns, but just in her presence, she is looking to go into a space and make it better, make you feel more confident, make you feel fearless. And I think that's heroic. I think that the more you open yourself up to a community, there's vulnerability there. And she's the kind of person that just comes as she is and says, I'm going to leave this space better than I found it. And then my third one that came to mind right away was Gigi, Gaye Glasspie, who you all know.
Yeah.
You don't know Gigi, the iconic orange lady, go find her. Gigi, for me, is a hero in that she is a Black voice that must be heard. And Gigi reminds me constantly that my particular face and skin and words and experience belong in all spaces. And even in the days when I'm not feeling confident in that, or I go into a space and I'm the only one, you know, I can hear Mama Gigi's voice, like, you belong here, you should be here, you know, don't play small. And I think I needed that at different times in my Fibre journey. So I immediately think of her as somebody who, she says, you know, watch your mouth about how you talk about yourself. And she says, you know, we are a work in progress. She has all these gems and these nuggets of like, be here, because someone like me, Marceline, and someone like her, we need to see other people like us in the community speaking up and contributing, because that's its own invitation. So that's my top three.
That's great. And I just want to mention with respect to Gigi, she was also mentioned in a New York Times article a few months back too. I'm going to put a link to all of the people you've mentioned as well, so people can access them. But I just want to tell you, Katie, it's so enjoyable to interview today and have a chat with you. It really feels like a informal chat, and I really enjoyed it.
And I think what I enjoyed most is your honesty and your calmness and you use the word empowerment quite a few times throughout this interview, and it's about confidence, and it's about being who you are and belonging and creating a sense of community. And what I like best is that when you speak your truth, you have the most beautiful smile, and the smile just comes out naturally. So thank you.
I think being with you all also contributes to that. I'm genuinely happy to be part of this. I am honored to have been asked, and I'm an actual fan. So this is pretty great for me too.
Well,
that goes both ways.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I am so glad that your community and my community can intersect.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I really enjoyed chatting with Marce. It felt like we were talking to someone we've known forever.
We've met her several times, and you're right. She's like your longtime friend. She is so personable. She is so friendly and natural in front of that camera. She mentioned how, you know, she's not sure when she still has some nervousness when she sets up to do her YouTube vlog, and yet when we're talking with her, it's like she's sitting right here in front of us, just shooting the breeze and easy breezy.
Except her picture comes in a lot clearer than ours. I think that's something we have to work out with our Wi-Fi service. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and she's so talented. Like, there's so many, like, just the education that you got on socks in that interview, I think was terrific. Did it inspire you to knit a pair of socks?
It did.
Okay. I think that's probably going to be your next project after the sweater.
Yeah, everything she says is significant, because she does have something to say, and she knows what she's talking about when it comes to her designs, and when it comes to knitting, when it comes to crocheting, and she mentioned how when she does these and she gets a lot of questions, she's also learning. She's learning tips and tricks along the way that she then incorporates into some of her patterns and designs or her everyday knitting.
Yeah, and I love how she brings the community into her world as well, like into her space. She is definitely someone who loves people, someone who loves interacting with people, and you see that. You see that in her patterns, in her YouTube episodes and whatnot. It's really, really nice.
Well, everything she mentions is about empowerment, and
Yeah.
I think my take on that is, when you're feeling empowered, you have this confidence about you, and you know what it is you want to say. And she said that teaching is something recent, but then we talked about her children are homeschooled, and I mentioned how you've been a teacher from way back. And the thing is, when she's teaching you about a pattern or about her socks or her talks at some of these festivals, she doesn't realize she's teaching more than just this pattern or process. She's teaching us a lot more. She's, everything there is to know about, life in general, or very specifically community and togetherness and one and all together. She's just incredible at teaching us more than just what's at face value.
Yeah, and even the discussion around socks. When she was holding up the socks and talking about how people's feet are different, and if you start at the toe and work your way from there, you've got the ability to change the shape and make it accommodate your foot, which that seems so rational, but then we don't all do it. And I know I don't do that. I start from the other end, but I think I've definitely been converted now.
Well, this is the thing. We talked about how, patterns are meant for, some interpretation. And she says even if you just used one part of her pattern, or where she might take something that she's learned and as a starting point for her and for someone else, if you take, a segment of her pattern, use it, and then to create, then she's taught you something. Her mission's accomplished.
Yeah.
But as I always already just said, it seems to me she's got a bigger mission. And it's not even something she does, thinks through and has a point of getting across. She just does. She just brings people together in different communities, all walks of life. And she does that because she is just so lovably friendly and smiles. And she's so calm and soothing. And there's something magical about her podcasts, her vlogs, her video YouTube when you watch it.
And even when she's not talking, like we talked about the travel vlogs, and she doesn't do a lot of talking in those, but it carries the same theme, and I'm not sure how she captures that. But I would say that the two of us are probably authorities on watching YouTube travel vlogs, because we watch them during the last 12 months. We've been at dinner time, we've been watching various, we'd say, do you want to go to Italy tonight? And so we'd watch a travel vlog to Italy and other places. And when I watch hers, she's definitely on the top of some of the best. It's just so beautiful the way she shoots festivals and whatnot. So highly recommend that. One thing we wanted to mention is just how to get a hold of her. She is on all over Instagram under heyBrownBerry, and she's also on YouTube as heyBrownBerry. And she has a Facebook group as well, and I think it's heyBrownBerry.
And I love the way she talked about the wildlife in her neck of the woods, because we were talking about it up here in Canada, and we're lucky if we see a fox, a coyote. There have been bears in the neighborhood. We talked about that
this week.
And here she is. She talks about how she loves getting outside. She hikes. She loves the outdoors. She's knitting out back, by a campfire. But then you got to watch out for the alligators and the snakes. And they sound like they're
coral snakes.
And those snakes, to me, are they poisonous?
Moccasin.
Are they just bad?
Yeah, you don't want to mess with them. So when will we be sitting around her campfire?
I know, because we have an open invitation, and vice versa, because we said, hey, come on by, bring the family.
Absolutely.
We're up here in the Canadian woods at the cabin. If you're coming this way to go to a festival. Now, she mentioned she hadn't been to Twist, and that's somewhere she definitely has on her to-do list, or would like to make it up there sometime. Yeah. And if she's coming from the south and headed to Montreal, she's got to come this way. Yeah. So we said, hey.
You know what? I think she was on the roster for Knit City, and when it was canceled. So maybe Knit City is another opportunity as well.
Right, Knit City, Montreal.
Yep.
She's on her way that way as well.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
So I really had a great time, and I just want to thank you, Marce, so much for spending time with us and sharing your story, not only with us, but with everyone else as well.
And I want to mention how we did see, we just saw her, I guess it's 2 years now, because at our last festivals, which was my first Rhinebeck, her first Rhinebeck.
Yes.
It was my first Vogue, but she'd been to Vogue before, but that's where we had seen each other. But we didn't have as much of an amazing time that we had just chatting this time around, because we took the time and we had this time together this way, which was wonderful. So we so look forward to seeing each other and everyone else out there again.
Absolutely.
Soon.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for watching, and take care, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.